want a big harvest this year but don't know exactly what plants to plant next to each other in order to get that big harvest that you always wanted? Well, in today's video, growers, I'm going to show you exactly those plants that you can plant next to each other in order to get that harvest. So first, let's actually talk about what is exactly companion planting, and that is basically like growing two vegetables or plants next to each other that basically benefit each other in some way or form. Basically, think of companion planting as if it was just in the wild with all of like the plants basically close and touching each other, but somehow they're benefiting each other. So that's basically what we're doing, but just in the garden way. Like for an example, this basil and these tomatoes are actually helping each other. The basil is basically giving out a scent that insects hate because of how strong it is, and it's helping the tomato actually produce fruit without no issue. As you can see, this tomato plant is super healthy because of all the plants around it actually helping it order to produce fruit. So basically, for an example one again, the basil and the tomato, that helps prevent like hornworms on the tomatoes because of how strong the basil scent is. And you can also use other vegetables. Basil is just a really common herb to plant next to the tomatoes. So if you are a beginner gardener or an experienced gardener, you probably heard of the three sister method, which is basically bean, corn, and squash. And that is basically like if you grow the corn with the beans, that'll give the beans like something to climb up on, which would be the corn, and then the squash would obviously be the ground cover, preventing like shade for the beans. And basically the beans help with the nitrogen that's in the soil and improving it, and then the squash basically obviously goes on the ground and it prevents the weeds, so it's actually helping in that case. So these are just young beans and cucumbers, but these are older plants. Whenever the beans start to actually climb and the cucumbers, they will actually benefit each other as well, because they also will climb on each other. So that'll give the beans something to support on while the cucumber trellises on the bamboo. I know this next one is completely different, but it is actually a good example. So instead of radish that I do not have, I have carrots that are basically the same similar thing. So basically, if you grow carrots in this case with lettuce, that'll actually help with the roots for the lettuce, since the carrots grow super fast, and that'll break down the soil enough for the roots to go past if the lettuce is still like young or something like that. And those two plants will also help with the pest issue, if there is a pest issue involved, which in this case there's not really much of a pest issue that I can really see, so we're still pretty good. But even though earlier I said in the video plant all plants like close to each other, there are a couple of plants that you do not want to mess with, which is if you plant onion or garlic next to the beans, that will be a disaster, which is you do not want to plant those two together, because that will inhibit the growth of the beans which will probably lead to not really a good harvest, or the beans will die because of the onions and garlic. And you also want to try your best to avoid planting potatoes next to your tomatoes, just because there's a good chance that they might carry some type of disease called blimp disease, which is really bad for those plants. So you don't want to plant tomatoes and potatoes to each other. But hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hope it was helpful for you guys, and I'll see you in the next one, and keep on growing.